If you own a chassis-based Land Rover, then at some point you'll be facing rust. Left to its own devices, this quickly becomes rot and repairs will be required to keep it on the road. That means you'll either need to know how to weld or how to inspect welds. In this episode's workshop powered by Bearmac, we'll show you how to do just that in our welding masterclass. All Land Rovers are prone to rusting, and so are most cars, purely down to the fact that they contain steel. It can come as a bit of a shock when you're happily getting on with your business only to find a hole has appeared in your beloved vehicle. Whilst it can look scary, the fix is generally not painful. We found a small hole on the chassis of this Defender, and after chipping away with the hammer, it's revealed a section of rot that's about 7 inches long. This has to come out and be repaired. Grinding and welding can be dangerous work, so safety kit is key. Never grind without goggles. I have the x-rays to show why this is a very bad idea. When I was a lad, I was always told to wear gloves whilst grinding, but I found that to be quite dangerous. It's far more difficult to know when your hand is slipping down the grinder, even with a guard, and difficult to turn the grinder off if needed in a hurry, so I opt for no gloves. Also, leave your favourite shell suit in the wardrobe. I know it's tempting, but trust me, you'll be up in flames before you know it. Grinding out the rotted section of your vehicle is simple enough. 1 or 2 cutting discs will usually do the job. Another safety tip here is to grind in the direction away from where the disc wants to take you. It won't snag or break your disc that way or injure you on the way. We can see here what the section of the chassis should look like if all was well. Here's what we've ground out of our chassis, showing it's poorly, and here's the plate that we're going to use to fix it. Later we'll also show you what can be done with welding to make a repair that's worthy of a full-time restoration vehicle. There are a few different types of welding, the main ones being MIG, TIG and arc welding. Now though the technique may be different for each of these, the principle is the same, but we're using electricity to arc and melt the two metals. That way we can melt them together. With arc and MIG welding we also introduce extra metal of the same type to maintain the thickness and strength of the two surfaces being welded together. In short, we're aiming to make two metals into one with all the strength of the original. Simple enough, but you'd be surprised how often you see terrible welding. I'm no artist, and as such there may be a comment or two below about who can weld neater, etc., but what I'm going to achieve here is a strong weld with good penetration. Before any welding commences we need to prep. Like painting, welding is only ever as good as the prep that you put in. Cleaning rust off any surfaces is key here. Rust does not conduct and makes for crappy welds. Here we recommend the use of linishing discs, not grinding wheels. That way we can't inadvertently remove all the bulk of the existing material. The result we're after is a clean surface to weld onto, not bigger holes in the chassis. So here we've got 2 welds that look okay on a couple of pieces of steel. The settings are exactly the same on the welder and the overall look is kind of the same. However, there is a big difference, on one that is very easy to get complacent about. The first one, the steel is welded straight together, and the second one has chamfered edges. So let's test the strength. The first one comes apart quite easily with a twist. This is comparable to vibration in your vehicle over time. The chamfered edges will hold fast, and the metal around the weld is actually what gives here. This is a good weld, and we very nearly didn't tell. The reason for this is penetration. The weld has effectively welded far deeper into the steel versus the first weld. You can see the difference, but it is slight, so top tip. For strong welds, chamfer your edges. As with grinding, you'll need some safety gear for welding. We use leather gauntlets and a welding mask. Do not be tempted to cheap out here. Marigolds and sunglasses will take some explaining in A&E. Just to be clear, it's not the heat or even the weld spatter that we're worried about here, even though both are quite uncomfortable. Welding, due to the UV light, will give you a suntan very quickly and can burn your skin within minutes. And even worse is arc eye. If you've not had this, I don't recommend you try and get it. The feeling is of somebody shoveling sand into your eyes constantly for a very long time. By looking at the flash of a welding gun, the surface of your eyes melt and it's incredibly unpleasant, so you have been warned. On this welder, the wire speed is set up automatically with the current. Different welders can be controlled differently, but if you're not sure, use a clean piece of steel to set it up and turn the power up just so it doesn't blast holes through the surface, and then the wire speed up so it doesn't melt back towards the tip of the welding gun. Here we start by tacking the corners. The heat generated during welding will quickly warp plates and you'll end up with a headache if you don't. Whilst welding, we're going to point the welding gun in the direction that we want to weld. This way we're always heating up the bits that we want to weld, not the bits that we've already welded, and pointing the gun straight down can start to blast holes. Once we've welded the whole way round, let's visually check for bits that we've missed or anywhere where the water can get in. We want this to be a watertight seal. And then lastly, give it a good whack with a hammer. No good welding will ever be damaged by this, and poor welds should be exposed, so if it cracks, go over it again. Now that's not the prettiest of patch-up jobs, but it is a good solid job that will extend the life of your vehicle and protect it against further rot. But if you do have the extra bit of time and want to do a restoration quality job that nobody will ever know you were ever there. For the same issue here, we've made two plates that fit inside the cutaway section of the chassis. The hardest part here is the time taking to grind and create two pieces that fit perfectly into the gap. You can see here that the original construction of this chassis has a welded lip, and we want to recreate that as well. Once we've lined up the new pieces, the process is the same as before. We've chamfered our edges for good penetration and we're ready to weld. And this time, once we're happy that our welds are solid and complete, we'll use a linishing disc, again just to level the surface down. And voila, a lick of paint, and this repair looks as good as when it rolled off the line. Just a couple more tips to finish. If you need to weld a fuel tank, we strongly recommend you take it to a specialist. Welding an empty fuel tank is like welding a bomb. Also, if you weld near brake lines, cables, fuel lines, then do take time to protect these beforehand, or move them first.